People don't stay in bad situations because they are blind. They stay because the human brain is deeply wired to protect what is familiar, even when what is familiar is painful. From the outside, the situation looks irrational. A job that drains the soul, a relationship that erodes self-worth, a life that feels smaller every year. Observers see options. The person inside sees threats. Because the brain doesn't ask, is this making me happy? It asks, is this keeping me alive? And familiar pain feels safer than unknown freedom. A bad situation that repeats itself becomes predictable. Predictability lowers anxiety. Even suffering, when predictable, becomes manageable. The nervous system adapts. It learns when the tension will rise, when the disappointment will arrive, when the emotional hit will land. And once pain becomes expected, it stops triggering alarm signals. This is how danger hides. The mind tells itself, at least I know what this is. At least I know how to survive this. At least I'm not risking something worse. Leaving removes the script. Uncertainty floods in. The brain imagines worst-case scenarios far more vividly than best-case ones. What if I fail and can't recover? What if I lose stability and regret it? What if I discover I'm not capable? What if this is the best I can do? Fear doesn't need proof. It only needs imagination. And imagination is strongest when the future is unknown. So people stay, not because they believe the situation is good, but because leaving feels like stepping into danger without armor. This is reinforced by consistency bias. Once someone has invested years into a situation, the mind feels compelled to defend that investment. Leaving would mean admitting, I spent years of my life on something that harmed me. The brain avoids that conclusion at all costs. So it reframes the narrative. It's complicated. It's not always bad. I've grown because of this. It will get better. Hope becomes a psychological anesthetic. It numbs the pain without changing the cause. And the longer hope is used to endure instead of act, the deeper the trap becomes. Another invisible chain forms through identity. People don't just stay in bad situations. They build identities around enduring them. I'm loyal. I don't quit. I'm responsible. I'm strong enough to handle this. At first, these identities feel empowering. Over time, they become cages, because leaving would mean violating the very traits they use to define themselves. They confuse endurance with virtue, tolerance with strength, silence with maturity, and slowly self-betrayal starts to look like character. The brain rewards consistency, not truth, so it suppresses signals of misalignment. It quiets discomfort. It normalizes dissatisfaction. Pain becomes background noise, and when pain becomes normal, danger becomes invisible. This is how people wake up one day realizing they've been surviving instead of living, without remembering when the shift happened. Staying in a bad situation does more than delay change. It quietly reshapes the way a person understands themselves, reality, and possibility. At first, the mind resists. There is frustration, anger, a sense that something is wrong, but resistance consumes energy. When the situation doesn't change, when leaving feels risky, impossible, or irresponsible, the brain looks for another way to survive. It stops fighting the environment and starts adapting to it. This is where the most dangerous shift occurs. The brain begins to reinterpret pain not as a signal, but as a condition of existence. Instead of asking, why does this hurt? It asks, how do I function while this hurts? This is not weakness, it's efficiency. The nervous system is designed to minimize suffering, even if that means lowering expectations, suppressing desire, and narrowing perception. This is how people don't just stay in bad situations. They become psychologically aligned with them. Over time, the brain builds an internal logic to justify staying. It's not that bad. It could be worse. This is just how life works. These thoughts don't arrive all at once. They form slowly. Each compromise feels reasonable. Each rationalization feels harmless. Together they create a mental prison where leaving no longer feels logical, even when suffering is obvious. This is reinforced by learned helplessness. When effort repeatedly fails to change outcomes, the brain stops associating action with improvement. Motivation doesn't disappear because someone is lazy. It disappears because effort begins to feel unsafe. Trying creates disappointment. Hope creates pain. So the brain protects itself by reducing both. Desire shrinks. Goals feel unrealistic. Dreams feel distant. Not because the person lacks potential, but because potential without movement feels unbearable. This is how people convince themselves they don't really want much. But that's not peace. That's emotional numbness. Another layer forms through loss of agency. Staying teaches the mind that life happens to you, not because of you. People stop asking, "What do I want?" and start asking, "What can I tolerate?" Tolerance is not a value system. It's a survival mechanism. And when tolerance becomes the foundation of a life, fulfillment becomes impossible. Familiarity begins to feel like safety. Even when a situation hurts, its predictability feels safer than the unknown. The mind exaggerates the danger of leaving and minimizes the cost of staying, because the cost of staying accumulates quietly. Years pass without collapse. Life remains functional. From the outside, everything looks fine. That's what makes it dangerous. Bad situations don't destroy people quickly. They drain them slowly. One day, the pain isn't sharp anymore. It's absent. No excitement, no urgency, no sense of direction. People mistake this numbness for maturity. I've accepted reality. I'm being realistic. But realism without agency is not wisdom. It's surrender. Confidence doesn't vanish overnight. It erodes through repeated self-betrayal. Each ignored warning weakens trust in the self. Eventually, people stay, not because they want to, but because they no longer believe their choices matter. That is the psychological endpoint of staying too long. And yet it is not permanent, because the brain that learned helplessness can relearn agency. The turning point is not courage, it's clarity. Not asking, "Can I survive leaving?" but asking, "What has staying already taken from me?" When that question is answered honestly, leaving no longer feels reckless. It feels necessary.